Hello, everybody. Welcome to Adventures in Dolls, the United Federation of Doll Clubs YouTube channel. I'm Karen Allen. Today, our program is on Huret, Munich art, Bild Lilli, dolls that broke the mold. It's presented by UFDC's second Vice President, Carol Cameron, and proves to be a most excellent program.
By way of introduction, when you look at the history of dolls, there are actually moments when a new doll comes along and it's unlike any other that previously existed, and it kind of starts a chain reaction. Other manufacturers follow suit, and before you know where you are, the doll world looks completely different. They break the mold, as I call it. And we're going to hear about three dolls that did just this. One of them is from the 1850s, the other is from the early 1900s, and then the third one is from the 1950s. And what I'll try and do is pick up similarities and differences as we go. But in the end, I'll do a sort of summary of that. So I hope you enjoy. Here we go. The first one we're going to talk about is Huret, and Huret from the 1850s. And this is the story of that doll and of its maker, a lady called Calixte Huret. Now, the historical context is in France in the 19th century was known as the Long Century because it was a time of political turbulence extending from the French Revolution to World War I. But it was also a century of great progress, as demonstrated by the wonderful expositions that took place throughout the 1800s. But the ones in the first half of the century were primarily French in nature, but the second half saw 5 world fairs in Paris. And the reason I mention this is all of these played a very important part in the Huret family story, and in particular in the Huret doll story. This is the Huret family tree, and the lady we're talking about around here is Calixte Huret. And this is her father, Leopold. Now, he was famous in his own right because he was initially a clockmaker, but he's best known for his work as a locksmith. He made padlocks, combination locks, portfolio locks, and keyholes. And he had contracts with the government for the postal service or the Ministry of Finance. And he actually became a mechanic and engineer of the king. He won various medals at these national expositions I mentioned that took place in Paris, but he later diversified into metal furniture. Actually, it was this business that eventually led to the miniature furniture being made for the dolls, and you'll see some of that later on.
Carol,
the great uncle, Louis-Francois Beffara, this gentleman here, he actually was quite an important figure in the children's upbringing because the mother died after the birth of Leopold, the son. So Adelaide Calixte, she had 2 sisters and a brother, Leopold. As I say, the father, very, very famous in his own right, but this gentleman here, who actually, again, was very famous for his work and his writings and research on Molière, he had a great influence on the 4 children. Now, these siblings actually were very close. None of them ever married, and they lived together all of their lives. And all of them, to a greater or lesser extent, were involved in the family business.
I'm sorry, buddy.
Okay, somebody's not muted.
Sorry, Carol, I don't want to interrupt. I've lost your PowerPoint. I'm getting you, a picture of you.
Do you want to sign out and come back in, David? I can't do anything from this end, I don't believe.
Okay, okay, I'll do that.
Okay. So Calixte took the lead on the doll business, supported by her sisters and also her brother. Now, Leopold, the son, actually took over from the father in the furniture business, and he was the one, from a point of view of the doll furniture, he was the key figure there. Now, I found this, which I thought was quite interesting. This is the nameplate for Leopold, the father, and it shows here his mechanic and engineer to the king status. So we even had a sort of brass plate to his name, but he, as I say, he was famous in his own right. So to the doll, Calixte actually got the idea of creating a doll from the 1844 exposition, and it took her many years to research and gather information and design prototypes before she was ready to launch her new doll onto the market. She wanted to make something that was completely different to what was available at the time. And these dolls that were available at the time were typically the dolls with the very stiff kid bodies. And she didn't see these as sort of playable. She wanted to make something that the children could play with. So, and she also wanted to make something that the children could identify with a flexible body. The children could easily dress or undress, and also that they could make clothes for. And she decided in the end to make an 18-inch doll that had the proportions of a 12-year-old girl. And this was her target market. So 12-year-old girls, she wanted a doll that looked like them. Now, all her dolls, as I say, measured 18 inches. Now they can actually be slightly more or less, because over time the bodies have expanded or contracted, but all dolls should be 18 inches, the Huret dolls. Now, her first doll was eventually achieved in December 1850. So, as I say, it took her 6 years. And actually, she patented this doll, and this is the patent documents. And actually, this was the only third patent for a doll since the introduction of patents in 1791. So she made sure that she got her doll patented. The other comment I'd make is her dolls were extremely expensive because they were very time consuming to make, and they were very limited production. And it was kind of on demand, and the maximum was around 1,200 per year. Now, if you compare that to Jumeau, some decades later, 1,200 per year is a relatively low number. Only the richest families could afford them. And I'd compare that to the approach of Romer, who was one of Huret's competitors at the time. Because Romer made much larger number of various sizes and style of doll and really targeted at the middle classes. So Calix had a particular business model of targeting, as I say, wealthy families. Now, her main thing was about the body. And looking at the number of substances, Calix chose gutta percha as the material for her bodies. And whilst in the short term that enabled her to meet her objectives, it turned out to be quite fragile in the medium and long term. The gutta percha dried out and became quite brittle. So this is why you find most early Hurets have replacement bodies. Now, the dolls were marked Huret on this kid collarette. I've given you a close up here. And this made it the first doll ever signed, if you like. And the collarettes are very useful because they include addresses on them and also references to dates. And this often enables you to date the doll. That's assuming that the collarette is the original one, of course, but this does actually help in the dating. Now, what you're seeing here is an 18-inch Huret bisque poupée with the shoulder head. And you'll notice this, what we call here, at least, a widow's peak. She's lost her hair, but this was another way of identifying original wigs on Huret dolls. This is a sort of hallmark of an early Huret doll. She's on her original gutta percha body, and the very first ones had no joints in the elbow, but this is a slightly later one with joints in the elbow. Now, the majority of French doll makers in the second half of the 19th century were body manufacturers or head manufacturers or assemblers or retailers. So if you like, the supply chain, people tended to concentrate, or companies tended to concentrate on one bit of it. But from the start, Calix did not involve any third party in the sale of her doll. You could only buy her doll in the Maison Huret shop in Paris, nowhere else. And this was all part of her wanting to make her dolls exclusive. So she actually was, as well as being very creative, she was a very good businesswoman, and she thought through, the implications of everything. As I say, you could only buy the doll from her. She cornered her market. If we look at the heads, now Calix initially chose China for the head of her doll, which was a relatively new concept for French dolls. And she created the original model for the head, and we think she then got Jacques Petit to supply it. He had made China shoulder heads for the stiff leather bodies, and he had a good reputation. So she partnered with him, that's the belief, to make her early China heads. Now, the appearance of the Huret poupée head has hardly changed over time, but it went from China to pressed bisque in 1861 and then molded bisque in 1890. And initially she used shoulder heads, and then after 1861 introduced separate socket heads with shoulder plates. So she did evolve the design, but basically the faces, you can tell a Huret doll when you see one because the basic head is the same. Now, initially, all the dolls were had painted eyes with a very distinctive sort of dreamy look. But from 1864 onwards, she also got glass eyes. So again, she adapted the original model, but she basically stuck to her original ideas. Now, the head painters were told never to make the same face twice, so that each doll would have its own personality. The wigs were initially made from astrakhan fur, and then Tibetan's coat hair, and then later on mohair, and then human hair. So again, she adapted as she went. So this is an 18-inch Huret porcelain poupée with a shoulder head. It's got no marks on it. She's got painted eyes. She's got this original astrakhan wig, although there's not very much of it left. And she's on an original jointed gutta percha body, but she's got the straight arm. So this is an early doll. She's got markings on the front of the gutta percha body, but not on the collarette, which is rare. So the belief is this is quite an early model. She's shown here with a velvet covered Huret miniature chair. If you remember, I mentioned the brother who inherited the furniture business from the father started to support Calix by making this miniature furniture. And this is an example. And again, these were marked Huret, so people would know this was coming from the Huret family. Now, I mentioned expositions. At the 1855 exposition in Paris, Calix Huret's doll was awarded a second-class medal, and this success was repeated in future expositions and helped to give the dolls the exposure they needed. And this is a layout of this is the front, sort of from an old print of what it looked like. This is a layout of what all the various stalls from the exposition. This is the opening of it by royalty at the time. I think it was Emperor Napoleon III and Empress Eugenie, I think, are up there. And this is actually the medal that you can see Calix Huret and in its original box. So this was awarded to her, and again she used this in all her advertising to give it prestige. Now, initially, Calix sold the dolls undressed, believing that the children, together with their mothers and their nannies, etc., would dress the doll. But this turned out not to be the case. And very soon she was getting demands for couturier clothing to go with the dolls. What she did then, she established a pattern, and then the prototype was made and sent to Calix for approval. And once finalized, it was sent to the couturier, who produced a very limited number. Again, it was this exclusivity with the doll she repeated when it came to the clothes. The fabric, which was often exclusive, was unlike anything else any other manufacturer was using. Again, because she wanted this to be different, something different in the market. And not very clear here, but you can see her clothes were stamped. This is ink stamped, Huret à Paris. They were also put in exclusive, what I call Huret green boxes, again, to give them this exclusivity. Remember, this was targeting at the richer end of the market. Now, Madame Farge was the first couturier she worked with to create her clothing, and her association with the Huret company lasted from the early 1850s to 1963. This 18-inch Huret poupée, again with a bisque shoulder head, painted eyes, original jointed gutta percha body, again with the straight arms, it's an early one. She's wearing an original Madame Farge dress and original Huret shoes, and both are marked Huret à Paris. And again, I've shown her here with a table. This is a Huret table. That is a beaded top. And again, the table is marked, another example of the miniature furniture that her brother did. Now, Miss Bureau also produced couturier clothing for Huret, and this, sorry, Mademoiselle, I should say, Bureau, also produced couturier clothing for Huret, and her association with Huret company lasted from the mid-1850s until 1880. So Calix established quite long-term relationships with a supplier, which was a good move. This is an example of a Mademoiselle Bureau dress. This sort of style is very, very popular with the soutache. You see a lot of these outfits with the soutache on them, wonderfully made. And here's another example. Tartan was another favorite. Again, maybe Queen Victoria set that fashion going, but again, you see quite a few of the outfits using tartan material. Now, this is a Huret bisque poupée with swivel head. So it's a later one, painted eyes. She's on a replacement body, and this is a jointed blown leather body by Victor Clement, and it's got jointed arms. And this apparently is one of only 2 replacement bodies where the Huret collarette, actually, the Huret head fits well. There's many bodies that you find that are replacement bodies, but it's this one and one other that really, they fit very, very well. And this is quite rare, this body. She's wearing an original Miss Borough dress, and it's got a wide brimmed hat, and it's a matching cape as well. You don't see this in the picture. But again, you can see this marvelous soutache, which is one of the hallmarks of the Huret outfits. Another beaded table is here, shown here with fringes. And again, it's a marked Huret miniature table. Now, as well as the clothing, what Huret tapped into was the desire for accessories. So she starts out with the doll. She then gets this demand for clothing. She satisfies that, and then she starts to get demand for accessories. So like the fashion dolls that followed in the wake of Huret, many different sorts of accessories were made for the Huret dolls. You can see here umbrellas, dogs, bags, miniature tea sets, you name it, it was made. Now, building on the success of the family furniture business, miniature metal furniture, you've seen some examples before, was manufactured for the dolls. Here you see, this is an adult chair that the brother would have made for the adult market, and this is an example of a miniature chair for the dolls. And this is a jardinière, again, marked Maison Huret. Everything was marked so that when people saw it, they'd know that it had come from the exclusive Huret shop. They also made beds, and you can see the metalwork here. That's very, very typical of the Huret design, and this is a lovely cradle. And here's an example. You saw a red velvet chair. This is a green one, and with a matching green table, again with the fringes. And here's another example, different materials again, but again, lovely, lovely accessories for your doll. Now, the clothing was actually expanded into the provision of whole trousseaux in the Huret marked trunks. So here's an example of one of the trunks, and again, it's got Maison Huret clear marking on it. The standard trousseau had 16 items. There was 3 dresses, a pair of shoes, a pair of stockings, a hat, a purse, and a pair of gloves. And the merchandise was sold in Huret marked boxes. It was all part of Calixte's merchandising, making her merchandise a class of its own. As I say, she was a very good businesswoman. Here's an example, a bit blurry, of unique handkerchiefs that she had made with these as sort of embroidered outlines and the printed decor, always with this sort of fancy edging, this festoon border, and with coloured thread. Wonderful. And she had a partnership with the Thierrys, the father and son, who made exclusive shoes for Huret between about 1853 and 1886. As I say, a long-term contractual relationship for the shoes as well. One size to fit her 18-inch dolls, and they were all signed Huret. She also had unique hats as well, made for Huret by special milliners, again signed Huret, and also these very distinctive umbrellas with the fringes. She definitely was into fringes on her tables, in her umbrellas, etc. And of course, you have the dogs. These were not made by Huret, but a number of manufacturers got in the act because they made very good companions for the Huret doll. And other manufacturers made things like papetriers, and this is a stamp, a miniature stamp box. So as I say, a bit like the fashion dolls that came later, all sorts of manufacturers climbed on the bandwagon and started to make these accessories. This is the inside of the papeterie. I can't pronounce that, papeterie. And this is just a sample of all the different sorts of things. You've got sewing kits here, you've got little diaries, bags, fans, here's a feather fan, brooches, powder puffs, dance cards, you name it. People started to get on the bandwagon because they saw Huret being very, very successful in marketing her dolls and her clothes and her accessories, and they jumped on the bandwagon to provide the dolls with their essentials, what they needed. So I've called this Act 2, the Huret Bébé, because Calix actually stepped back from ownership of the company in 1867. So she started in 1850, she'd been making her dolls in 1844, so she'd been at it for 23 years. But she kept a very active interest in developments in the doll world. And she visited the exposition in 1878, and that's where she saw the jumeau bébés, so and the brew bébés, etc. And she decided she would try and make one of her own. So she decided again to use gutta percha. Again, it was 18 inches, but this time she wanted it to represent a child, a 5-year-old child. So you can see this body is very different to the body of her, what I'll call enfantine. And she moved much more quickly on this because everything was ready in about 1879. So it only took her a year, 2 years to get this up and into what was a very limited production. As I say, very few were made, most of glass eyes, but this one has a painted eyes. And again, as you can see, the clothes here made by couturiers, exceptional quality. And again, from 1880 to 1886, the body was gutta percha. But this time, and you can maybe see it in the pictures here, she opted for bisque hands. So any part of the doll that you could actually see, namely the head and the hands, she decided she'd make them bisque. Now, subsequently, they were made by the people who bought the company from her with wooden bodies, but still with bisque hands. But originally, again, it was gutta percha body with bisque hands and the bisque head. So this is a painted eye example. It's got its original one-piece gutta percha body. There's no marks on the head or body, nothing at all. This is the glass-eyed one, again, 18 inches, and she's got a bisque socket head, but this time, as I say, with glass eyes. Now, she's got her original 2-piece gutta percha body, and it's got the collarette round it. It's got her bisque hands, and again, with the original clothing. These are wonderful dolls. Now, as I say, Calix stepped back, and in fact, this is showing you the ownership of the company. Post-Calix, 1850, it was in her name, and then in 1857, it was with the Huret sisters. 1864, she partnered with Longchambeau. 1867, he took over completely. And then he died, and it went to his wife, and then it went to Lemoyne, and at Carret. And in 1902, it went to Mademoiselle Prévost, and it was still going in 1931. So one of the things to take away from this is, the longevity of this company. It lasted for over 80 years. And the Huret name still meant a lot in the market because it was a brand for exclusivity, for quality, etc. So it was amazing, that it went on for so long. I would particularly mention Prévost because under Prévost, it evolved into more what I'll call an art doll. And you'll hear more in the next session with talking about Munich art, where the nature of the doll changed. But again, they kept the quality and they kept the magnificent fashions, particularly pre-World War I. That's one to watch out for. So the address of the company, I mentioned they had them on the collarettes. This is one of the ways you can date the dolls you're looking at, because they did change and it's all documented where the address was. And this was on many of the things that were made, the dolls, or on the boxes for the clothing, etc. And as I said, the Huret bodies over time, again, gutta percha straight arms became gutta percha with jointed arms, gutta percha with bisque hands, and then it went to wooden with metal hands. And so you can date the dolls from looking at the body that the doll is on. So that's a very quick story of the Huret doll. And For me, I want to say it's a doll that broke the mold, because it did take the doll world off in a new direction. And here's some examples. I mean, it first went to the French fashion dolls. So the Enfantine people copied that and produced these wonderful fashion dolls. And then that morphed into the French bébés. So, you know, we typically talk about the sort of legacy in terms of the sort of the golden age of French dolls. Well, for me, Huret really was right at the start of that and kicked them off. So let me pause there, and no, we're going to go through, aren't we? We're going to go through. Okay, so let me start the next one. So moving the clock forward 50 years, Munich art dolls first appeared in the scene in the early 1900s. And again, like Huret, they were something completely new. And they started a movement that dominated the doll world up until the Second World War. And here is their story. The lady behind the Munich arts is a lady called Marion Cowlitz. She was the originator of the dolls. Now, as we'll hear, there was a lot of other people involved in their production, but she was very much the central figure. This, I couldn't find a picture of Calix Huret, but I did find one of Marion Cowlitz. And this is, you know, a photo of her with some of her wonderful dolls taken in 1908. Now, actually, she was 43. So she was a lot older than Huret when she started on her dolls. And you can see she's surrounded here by 12 of her dolls dressed in original clothing. And again, what strikes you when you look at this is the wonderful quality of the clothing and of the dolls, of course, with all the hand embroidery, etc., etc. But unlike Calix Huret, we have no knowledge of Cowlitz's family background. We don't have a family tree. We know very little about her. We do know she was born in March 1865 in northern Germany. And at some stage, we know that she moved to the town of Gemund on Lake Tegernsee in Bavaria, and where she had her home and doll factory. We also knew that she had a base in Munich. And we also know that she was based in Gemund until 1924, when she moved somewhere else until she died in 1948. But apart from that, it's very sketchy what we know about her. The only thing really that we know is before she got into the doll world, she was a portrait painter and a children's book author. So prior to 1908, where she entered into the doll world, she was working, illustrating and working with children. So here are two examples of her books. There are some documented diary comments of people about her that she's described as having a very sunny disposition, being a modern doll mother with a warm demeanor, with a deep love of childhood. But I think it's a bit sad that for somebody that left such a legacy to the doll world, we really know very little about her as a person. But we do know how it all started. I talked about expositions with Huret. Well, very similar with Munich art. It was 1908, and the person responsible for the exhibit was Max Schreiber, who was the manager of the doll and toy department for the main Hermann Tietz department store in Berlin. He also managed the branches in Munich and Hamburg. And this is actually a photo of the Hermann Tietz store. It's a huge building, very, very grand. This opened in Munich in 1895. Now, his purpose in mounting the exhibit was pure and simple. It was commercial. He wanted to revive flagging doll sales. So remember, this is 1908. We're past the sort of golden age of the French. The Germans are doing better in the bisque dolls, but the doll sales are flagging, and he wants to give it a kickstart. So we organized a doll design contest and invited those already involved in doll making, plus some artists who'd never been involved in the doll world before, and some sculptors, to participate. And he had only one condition, and that was the dolls must look like the children who played in the streets of Munich. So I couldn't find a photo of Max Schreiber, but I did find photos of Oskar Tietz and his uncle Hermann Tietz. Hermann Tietz was the first to implement the idea of a department store in Germany. And when you look at that building, I mean, it was extremely expressive, palace-like stores. They were designed to offer the customers a unique shopping experience. And by 1927, some 13,000 employees worked in these Tietz department stores. So the business concept was very, very successful. So this was the business brain behind Munich art. It was not Marion Cowlitz, as we'll hear. So building on the success of the first exhibit, Cowlitz joined Hermann Tietz again in a second exhibit that celebrated the Munich's 750th anniversary, and it was held in the Munich Fairground. Now, this photo actually shows the exhibit hall 1 in the fairground, which was the site of the 1908 exhibit of the Munich art dolls. And the words down the bottom here, they actually translate into Munich exhibit 1908, middle building of exhibit 1, built by Wilhelm Birch. Now, an article which was on exhibit in a local newspaper included the following: room 58 displays a collection of dolls. A large group of dolls are assembled in the room, so simple and yet so original a doll has never been seen before. And there is actually an original archival photo, which I'm showing here. This is from the 1908 Fairground catalogue, and it's of room 58 in the exhibit hall. And you can see down the bottom, maybe it says Cowlitz. And this bit actually, very importantly, names some of the designers of the doll. Mary Mark Schnur, Joseph Wackerle, and Paul Vogelsanger, and you'll hear a lot more about them in a minute. And it also mentions the people who dressed the dolls: Marion Cowlitz, Alice Hegemann, and Lillian Provenus. So, and it mentions Hermann Tietz. So we got some documentary evidence here of this particular exhibit. And the design of the room was actually done by Marion Cowlitz. She was asked to give it some sort of childhood, warm sort of feeling, and we know she designed the room. Now, she numbered these dolls she just called them GM numbers 1 to 20, models for doll dresses. And GM is the German patent design, which is usually used to protect intellectual property against imitation by third parties. As I say, that's how she numbered the dolls, GM 1 to 20. Now, the contest was a great success, and the exhibit received a much acclaim from visitors, especially these particular dolls. So this really launched the Marion Cowlitz dolls. And following the exhibit, complimentary articles about the group of artists and sculptors responsible for these dolls began to appear in books and magazines. And really, my conclusion from this is that the German doll reform movement, or art movement, as it became to be called, was off and running. Now, Marion realized the importance of exhibitions to keep her dolls in the public eye. And there's a number of photographs here from various exhibitions that she was very successful. And in fact, she came to the attention of royalty, because as you'll hear, a number of European royals bought dolls for their various families, etc. And she also utilized that in her advertising. So this particular exhibit took place in the Hermann Tietz store in Berlin at Christmas 1908, and it was part of the display showing the development of dolls made in Sonneberg. Now, the reason this is so important, this particular exhibit, is that this was the start of a long-term relationship between Cowlitz and the Sonneberg Museum. And you know, in 1910, the Sonneberg Museum included some Munich art dolls in their display that celebrated the opening of the Sonneberg Industry and Trade Museum building. And in fact, 13 original Munich art dolls from the 1908 exhibit were donated for that display, and they can still be seen in the museum today, over 100 years later, and you'll see pictures of them shortly. So not only did Cowlitz use the expositions to gain advertising, but she established partnerships with people. Now, she exhibited in the International Studio in May 1909, and in 1910, she exhibited the Leipzig Fair and at the International Exhibition in Berlin. And this was where the German Empress bought a Cowlitz boy doll for the eldest son of the Crown Prince. She continued to produce new models in 1911 and 1912, and she called them GM numbers 21 to 34. So the dolls were numbered. These three dolls here were part of an exhibit at the studio in January 1911. And in the same year, she exhibited in Berlin, Paris, and Vienna. So what I'm trying to paint is a picture where over, from 1908 onwards, she was exhibiting, she was getting advertising, royalty were buying her dolls, she was winning prizes. So she won a prize for the most original artist doll at the Frankfurt International Doll Exhibit. And also in 1912, in the Bavarian trade show, she advertised that her dolls had won gold medals in 1910 in Brussels and a first prize in 1911 at the International Doll Exhibit, etc. In 1912, she was honoured with membership of the International Union of Arts and Science in Paris, and also the Crown Princess of Romania visited the Cowlitz workshop and made a lot of purchases via the Bulgarian embassy. The Queen of Bulgaria ordered 6 Cowlitz dolls for her family for Christmas. So this is all going swimmingly well. You can tell from my voice that there's a but coming here. Her dolls actually started to appear in the USA as well, in the French doll shop of Gimbel Brothers in New York. And some of her dolls dressed in German regional costumes were distributed by Arnold Doll Company. This is a photo of some Cowlitz dolls at a German art exhibition at the Newark, New Jersey Museum in 1912. So these photos are great documentary evidence which sort of track her and her participation in exhibits. Now, some key documents. In 1909, Cowlitz registered a trademark, Cowlitz Art Dolls of Munich. And like Kathy Cruz, who was about to come after her, she also used postcards to advertise her dolls to potential customers. And in 1911, she registered the trademark Cowlitz for dolls, dolls' bodies, doll heads, doll wigs, and doll dressing. Importantly, though, she never registered what we call a DRGM design patent for her dolls, which was used to register inventions and novelties. And this is unfortunate because it would have revealed a lot of aspects of her doll making and how she actually made the dolls. But because she didn't do this, there's not actually proven evidence of how she made the dolls. And there's not, because it was, as you'll hear, a very short-lived production, her dolls, there just aren't many records. So we're lacking a bit in documentary evidence. This is actually part of a letter sent by the Tietz department store to the museum in Sonneberg, listing the details of the 13 dolls I mentioned that were loaned, or sorry, donated to the museum. And we've got names here, which I will not try and pronounce because my German pronunciation is awful. But what it shows here is dolls 1 to 3 were made by Wanda von Kranek, doll 4 was made by Joseph Backerley, and 5 through 13 were made by various artists. And I just ask you to note the pencil number down here. I've come to the conclusion this is actually a record of the number, each dog was a unique number. So 2242, 2255. I believe this was, by that stage, her it shows the number of dolls she had produced by that time. The other piece of documentary evidence is this original invoice written in 1912 by Marion Cowlitz, accompanying 4 dolls that were sold to the Sonneberg Museum. So the first 13 were donated, these 4 were sold. And again, you can see down here, she's up to 2965, 2968 by 1912. So I'm of the belief that she didn't manufacture many more than 3,000 dolls, because shortly after this, her production stopped. Now, the letterhead here includes what's become known as her emblem doll, and you'll see another picture of that later on. And also up here, she's still advertising the fact that she won gold medals in Brussels. So at least we've got this documentary evidence that we can utilize in identifying the dolls. Okay, so we get to the dolls. Now, Cowlitz did not consider her dolls to be art objects that required high prices. So unlike Huret, this was very much she wanted to target her dolls at children and make them affordable. So she wasn't thinking about them as collector's items. I wonder what she'd think about now, our attitude to them. But she meant them to be toys for children. And they were priced about the same as any other doll in the market in Germany, despite their artistry. So again, from a business point of view, she was very creative, etc. But she wasn't in it to make a lot of money. That was not her motivation. They were also built to last, but with the idea if they were broken, they could be easily replaced. So Huret, again, she offered replacement bodies. The Munich Art, she offered dolly hospital services as well. Now, like Kathy Cruz, again, Cowlitz did all the quality control. Any doll that came out passed through her hands before it was sent out into the doll world. Now, most of the dolls are socket heads, but there are a few shoulder heads. And the heads are usually described as being hard composition, but also sometimes described as papier-mâché. They are extremely hard. In fact, you could be forgiven for thinking they're wood. They're not wood. They are composition / papier-mâché. Now, the Cowlitz dolls have generally survived in good condition. They were very, very well made. Sometimes the paint has worn off and they've been slightly repainted or touched up, but generally speaking, the heads are in good condition. They do have some markings sometimes. Sometimes at the base of the neck, you see the word Marion, or V for Vogelstein, or K for Cowlitz, or sometimes there's like a K2, something like that. And sometimes, very rarely, you see the Cowlitz trademark, the image of this young girl pulling a platform toy as a sticker or a decal. But that's very rare because normally they've worn off. I'd mentioned the doll designers before. To date, 16 distinct facial molds have been identified, and the dolls come in a range of sizes. So Huret stuck to 18 inches, Cowlitz made them anywhere from 12 to 25, with the same head design on different sizes of body. And actually between the different facial painting, the different wigs, and sometimes the boys have painted hair, different clothing, each doll is unique. So there's a similarity with Huret. No two dolls are alike because they were deliberately designed to be unique. Cowlitz is recorded as saying this: I don't want any two of my dolls to look alike. I want them to be unique. Now, Renaissance paintings and sculptures of children were often used as sources of doll heads for art dolls, and Cowlitz was said to have been influenced by the work of the Renaissance artist Donatelli. And the doll head modelers were Vogelsanger, Paul Vogelsanger, Joseph Wackerle, and Mary Mark Schnur. So let me show you some of theirs. The first one is Paul Vogelsanger. Now, after other Munich artists were no longer mentioned as being working with Marion, Vogelsanger is still noted. So I think he had the longest term relationship with her. And so not surprisingly, most of the Munich art dolls are Paul Vogelsanger designs. And the newspapers described his dolls as sort of calmer, more harmonic and friendly. He also designed the dolls with the molded hair. And here's 3 examples here. This one here is 20 inches, 18 inches, 16 inches. And typically the dolls had a name that described either the costume, the area the costume came from, or, so this was Romanen, because the Romanen 2, she was called, because her clothing was sort of Romanian regional costume. And a lot of the dolls did have regional costumes. They were meant to look like Munich art children, you know, they were not meant to be fancy schmancy. This guy here is, his name is, I can't pronounce it in German, but he's a coach driver because he's dressed as a coach driver. Now, one of the distinctive features of Vogelsanger, his dolls typically have quite small eyes. This one is a bit different. This is a very different mold from him with the open, closed mouth. And you know, quite a smooth complexion. So these dolls you can typically recognize a Vogelsanger doll. These look completely different to me. Joseph Wackerle. Now, Wackerle was actually a sculptor in the King's Porcelain Factory before he started to sculpt Munich art dolls. And he has what are described as more expressive heads with, you'll see later on in one of his profile dolls, they've got a sort of protruding upper lip, but also the size of the eyes, they look somewhat startled, really, much broader eyes and rosy cheeks. So if I just flash between the two of them, particularly these two here and these here, you'll see these look distinctly different. This one in the middle is a rare example of a shoulder head. So this is one of the baby dolls, but that's a shoulder head. Mary Mark Schnur, the only dolls I could find that she made were wax dolls. So very, very distinctly different to either Joseph Wackerle or Paul Vogelsanger. The doll painters, Cowlitz herself painted the dolls. Remember, she was originally doing illustrations for children's books, etc. So she was the painter. Alan Stickel and others painted the heads. The vast majority have painted eyes and open closed mouths, and some have painted eyebrows. Some of them have no eyebrows at all. And early on, it was believed that somehow the eyebrows had worn off, but there's been sufficient number of dolls that don't have eyebrows. The belief is they were not painted with eyebrows in the first place. And some of the boys have painted here. Now, they were painted using oil-based paints, and really it stood the test of time because, as I say, most Munich art dolls today retain their sort of patina and their colour. The costumiers, well, again, a lot of attention was paid to the outfits. Marion Kaulitz herself, Aline Stickel, Wanda von Kranek, there's a whole list of names who were involved in dressing the dolls, typically in German or French provincial costumes or sort of colourful children's play clothing. Beautifully detailed, variety of fabrics, etc. But they were not like the enfantine outfits or the sort of very posh, what we call it, outfits of the Huret dolls. These were sort of dolls, these costumes were playable and were meant to represent children on the street. Now, these are the 4 dolls, for example, that were, and you'll see them later on, were sold to the Sonneberg Museum. And we know that Marion Kaulitz and Aline Stickel dressed them because that's on the documentation that went along with the dolls. Wanda von Kranek, she dressed these dolls because, again, that's on the documentation of the dolls that were donated to the museum. We know this lady, Clara Stewart, particularly dressed a lot of the dolls in the regional costumes. And as I say, we know other people were involved, but we don't know which outfits they did because there's lacking of documentation. So I've talked about the heads quite a bit. The bodies, unlike Huret, Kaulitz didn't really focus on the bodies. She focused on the heads and the artistry of the heads. She bought her bodies in. Now, majority were supplied by Kuno and Otto Dressel, although K-Star and Kestner have also been mentioned as suppliers, but the majority of them are these wonderful Kuno and Otto Dressel bodies. And I did read somewhere that in the 1960s, many dealers, when they got a Munich art doll, would take the head off and use the body for a bisque-headed doll. So it makes me cry when I hear that, but apparently that was something that happened because these bodies were such great quality that they were used for other things. Now, as I say, most of the bodies are these composition, but some of the rarer shoulder heads have been found on cloth or leather bodies with a variety of wood composition or bisque arms, but also being supplied by Kuno and Otto Dressel. So as I say, most of the bodies are this composition, but you can find other bodies. So don't assume if you find a Munich art doll on a different body to this, that its body's been replaced. So I mentioned these 1909 Sonneberg Museum dolls. So, and this is actually a recent photo of the museum itself. It's a wonderful museum. If you ever get a chance to go there, they've got many toys and dolls, including these 13 Munich art dolls that last time I went were still out on display. So, as I say, here's that reminder of the list of the 13 dolls. These were the ones that were donated. And here are the dolls themselves. So these were the first 8 dolls I'm going to show you were all designed by Joseph Wackerle, and you can see the large eyes and the thin nose, and you'll see the protruded lip in a minute. But most of them are on the jointed papier-mâché bodies, but one of them has a leather body. And some are known to be dressed as by Wanda von Kranek. But I'll just quickly go through these. So these 2 are Joseph Wackerle, as are these. Wonderful, wonderful character faces. The thing I didn't mention is the other thing to notice is to feel the face of the doll, because the Paul Vogelsanger dolls are smoother to touch than the Joseph Wackerle. His dolls had a rougher finish to them. I don't know why, but that's one of the differences between them as well. Here's another. Now, this is the profile one I talked about. And you see that protruding upper lip? That is a hallmark of a Joseph Wackerle doll. Now, these 2 were designed by Paul Vogelsanger. And again, you can see these eyes, the narrow eyes. So again, I'll just quickly flick between, distinctly different in design. And these are the 3 dolls, the wax dolls by Marie Marc Schnur. So again, if you get the chance, these 13 dolls are still on display at the museum, and it's well worth a trip. Now, the 1912 Sonneberg Museum dolls, as a reminder, these were sold to the museum. And in fact, I was lucky enough on eBay to find a photograph of them. It was a postcard. And not only was it a lovely sort of picture on the front of them, but on the back, it actually has the post is actually bought at the museum and posted at the museum. And you can hear Sonneberg, the museum here, Deutsches Spielzeugmuseum Sonneberg, Puppenreform 1908. So this is a real treasure. This is, as I say, a beautiful postcard on the front, but also it was actually bought and posted at the museum. One of those magical eBay finds that you have every so often. So this is a close-up of the 4 dolls. These were all done by Paul Vogelsanger Designs, and this is one of his with the lovely wispy painted boy here. This jacket and this outfit, you do see this short jacket on the dolls quite a lot. It was obviously fashionable at the time, but beautiful, beautiful outfit. These are all dolls about 19 or 20 inches. They're a lovely size. Here's a lady. And in fact, I have a Munich art that came with this dress, and I was very excited when I saw this photograph because I realized it must be an original dress because it's exactly the same material. My doll is missing her apron, but it's got the same dress. And this is a lovely, lovely mold with this beautiful sort of rosy cheeks and the lovely mouth. And again, this is an example with no eyebrows, but again, the short jacket, beautifully dressed. What I haven't said is that she didn't make extra clothing. So there was no trousseau or anything for these dolls. They were sold just with the outfit they were in. So unlike Huret, she didn't start to sort of expand her business model to include clothing or accessories for that matter. She stuck with the dolls. That was what she was producing and that's what she focused in on. And this is the final one. This is her emblem doll. You might have noticed with the lovely slippers here. This was the doll that she chose as her emblem doll and appeared in her paperwork. So the start of the troubles. So she starts in 1908. She gets a very successful kickstart working with the Tietz department stores. She expands with these various exhibitions. She has royalty buying her dolls. It's all going very well. She's got a relationship with the Sonneberg Museum. And then, so her success was noticed and competitors started to respond. And as early as 1909, this gentleman here, Franz Reinhardt, who was the director of the Cameron Reinhardt doll factory, he registered the trademark Character Puppe, and he organized an exclusive invited guests only exhibition, guess where, at the Berlin Tietz department store, to launch their first character baby head, mold 100, otherwise known as the Kaiser baby, along with mold 101, dressed as either a girl, Marie, or a boy, Peter. Now, there are mixed reports as to the success of the initial success of this K-Star R venture. Some reports say it didn't take very long before they were overwhelmed with orders. So, they were not able to deliver what the customers wanted, to other folks saying that they ended up not being able to sell these. Now, whatever the story, they did eventually become successful. And the first public display of these dolls was in Christmas 1910 at the same Berlin branch of the Hermann Tietz store. And this display saw the start of the wonderfully successful Kathy Cruz dolls as well. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is that Marion Cowlitz took a look at some of these dolls and said, they look like my dolls. And she claimed in 1911 newspaper ad to be the inventor of the character dolls, and she accused Cameron Reinhardt of copying her doll faces, copying the clothing, copying the hairstyle. And K-Star R issued a challenge to Cowlitz to accuse them if she felt she'd been wronged. Now, Max Schreiber of the Tietz department store entered the controversy and he sided with K-Star R. Don't know why. Maybe he looked at the big guy versus the small guy and said, I think I'm going to back the big guy. From a commercial point of view, this is going to be more successful. But for a period of time, the two, K-R and Cowlitz, disputed their claims in newspaper. Eventually, Cowlitz asked her attorney to intervene. But unfortunately for Cowlitz, unlike Huret versus Romer, because Huret took Romer to court and won the case, K-R won the resulting lawsuit. But looking at these photographs, you know, you can see why Cowlitz felt so strongly. As I say, this is a K-R 102 with sort of painted hair. Do you remember that unusual Paul Vogelsanger head that I showed you? I mean, this is such a copy. This is the 109 and the 105. Small eyes, Paul Vogelsanger, absolutely. So, whether it was the impact of the lawsuits or something else, in all the books and articles I've read, there's very little mention of either Cowlitz or her doll business from about 1913 onwards. I say it's like the doll world's version of Hitchcock, The Lady Vanishes. She just disappears. Now, I did find one mention of her making beverage warmers with doll-like heads in 1915, but really, and there's also, I found this, a note of a doll being made in a studio headed by Cowlitz through the 1920s. There's a specific mention of dolls. This picture here, this is 2 Munich art dolls. It was displayed for the International Studio in April 23. But if you read the caption, it says, Cowlitz doll, named from their creator, Bertha Cowlitz. I've never heard her called Bertha Cowlitz. So this was what, 1923, and they couldn't even get her name right, who initiated a great reform in doll making about 1910. So it's very, very sad. And there is a letter written in 1915 by a Mrs. Lilli to Kathy Cruz. And this is what the letter says. I bought 3 dolls from poor Cowlitz at Christmas time. The poor soul had tried to commit suicide because of the suffering needs of another day's survival. Now, I read that and it made me so sad, because it makes you wonder what happened between 1913 and 1915 to lead her to try and take her own life. I mean, yes, she'd lost the lawsuit. Of course, we don't know how World War I impacted her, because by 1915 that had been going for a good couple of years, but it just made me so sad to see this. Now, we do know in 1924, Cowlitz moved to a small town called Bayerisch Gemein with her friend Aline Stickel. And Stickel is actually listed as a painter of art in the town archives. She died there, Cowlitz, in June 1948 at the age of 83. So she did live a long time. But it was, for me, a very sad ending for the woman whose creativity had taken the doll world off in a new direction. So she didn't enjoy lasting success in her lifetime, unlike Huret. And despite her obvious talents, she disappeared from the doll scene almost as quickly as she'd arrived. And in my book, she was sort of cheated of both fame and financial reward. But the good news is she left this wonderful legacy, which we can all enjoy today. Okay, are we good to go?
We are, and I just want to mention, if people have questions, put them in chat and we'll hit them at the end. So go ahead, Carol, part 3.
I'm going to take a quick drink. It's not gin.
Poor Carol's been talking for a long time.
You can cut that bit out, Karen. Right, Cowlitz, part 3. So we wind the clock forward to the 1950s now. And in 1950s, a doll appeared that was to set the scene for yet another new craze, the modern fashion doll. Now, the motivation behind creating this doll was not to provide children with something new or to revive flagging doll sales. It was actually to help successfully launch a new newspaper that was coming on the market. But this doll, in its launch, was to be, unknowingly, the inspiration for one of the most recognizable and successful toys of all time, namely Barbie. And the name of this doll is Bild Lilli. Now, Lilli was born on the June 24th, 1952. The Bild newspaper, its first issue, they had to fill a gap. And with only 40 minutes left, Reinhard Bothian, a cartoonist, was asked to create a character for a comic strip. Now, talk about deadlines. His first attempt was a figure with a baby face, but the chief editor turned it down, told him to go back and try again. So Berthian changed his drawing, and this very young, pretty, curvaceous blonde appeared. And this is a sketch that Berthian did. Now, here's a picture of Berthian with Lilli. This is Berthian here. Actually, he's pictured with his dog, who actually appeared in one of the Lilli cartoons. But here you can see is the sort of cartoon that he did. And this was a little book of cartoons that was produced. Now, this is his most famous creation. He did produce other things later on, but he made her personality kind of naive, seductive, sexy, but yet her look was still described as youthful and innocent. And they decided to name her Lilli. And she was an absolute instant success. Now, Bild Lilli's story is the story of Germany in the 1950s. She was born just as the Western sector of the divided Germany was starting to tackle the economic devastation caused by World War II. Everybody wanted to look like Brigitte Bardot with a sort of close-fitting pullovers, skirts and pants and blonde hair tied back in a sort of girlish ponytail. And Berthian, who lived in Hamburg at the time, was clearly inspired by the young women that he saw on the streets of Hamburg. He gave her a perfect body, lovely high heels, he gave her makeup, painted fingernails, and this sort of cheeky, sexy, independent expression. He captured the moment perfectly, and she actually became a symbol of the new femininity, and much more than a doll. She became sort of as a trendsetter. And it was this success that gave Heinz Frank, the owner of a manufacturing agency in Hamburg, the idea of producing a Lilli doll. And with the agreement of the Lilli newspaper, the Bild newspaper, Frank obtained exclusive production rights for the doll and any accessories. He then set up a contract with O&M Hautzer in Neustadt, Coburg, to manufacture the doll. Now, Rolf Hauser, the owner, asked his chief designer, and you can see a picture of him here, Max Weisbrot, to create a Lilli doll based on the cartoon drawings. Hauser met with Berthian in 1955 to look at the prototype, and they both agreed that Weisbrot had created an absolute masterpiece. Production started with the Greiner and Hauser company making the dolls and the 3M company assembling them and doing the hair and dressing them. So it was a limited number of businesses involved in producing the doll. And on August 1955, the Lilli doll was officially launched on the front cover of that edition of the Bild newspaper. Now, at first, the dolls were not intended for children, but as a promotional gimmick for the newspaper. And as can be seen from these ads, they were actually aimed at adult males because they were sold in tobacconist shops, paper shops, and at the airports. And you can see here is a picture of, he's bought one of the Lilli dolls and a bunch of flowers for his girlfriend. And reading through some of the articles, it was clear that the message he wanted to give his girlfriend was, I want you to look like Brigitte Bardot and this doll. And here's two pilots. They've actually got a little Lilli in their cockpit. So as I say, originally, this was targeted at men. But soon, children and women spotted her, and she became a product for all, from child to grandpa. So let's have a look at the dolls. Now, she came in two sizes, 11.5 inches and 7.5 inches. This is an 11.5 inch doll here. And they were referred to somewhat unimaginatively as Big Lilli and Small Lilli. That's what they were called. So a bit like Munich Art, she numbered her numbers GM 1 to 20 or whatever. These were called Big Lilli and Small Lilli. Now, these larger dolls came first, this larger doll in 1955, and the smaller one followed a year later in 1956. Now, she's got a 5-piece body, as you can see here, and they were strung with sort of white-coated elastic stringing. The head of the large Lilli was attached by a piece of molded plastic and cannot be detached from the body without damaging it. The head and the torso were made of polystyrol and were injected into the molds. The hollow arms and legs were made of Lubelon, and the pieces were spray painted or dipped in color. And as they were all handmade, no two dolls are exactly the same. So when you look at Lilli's over time, the colors change, and because they only did a limited production, and if you like, they to make up a mix to with different chemicals, etc. And unless the mix was exactly the same, they come out slightly different. So the earlier dolls have a sort of more grayer tone to them, and they get gradually sort of pinker and almost a tan look over time. And it's all to do with the chemical mix that was used to make the dolls. Now, 3 patents were registered for Lilli covering the design of her joint neck, the way the hair was held in place, and her hip design, which allowed Lilli to sit with her legs together. And the other thing was she had holes in the bottom of both feet, which allowed the metal wire protruding from the bases of the stands to hold her in place. So if I show you this again, this is a Lilli base. And as you'll see later on the photos, there was holes in the bottom of both feet and wires went up. A wire went up from the hole, one of the holes, into her leg, and that held her in place. I don't find them overly stable, but they do the job. And this is how the hair, it's fascinating. It's attached with a screw, the wig through the head, and the head comes in 2 pieces. I've never taken a doll apart, but I found this photo that shows you. So here's examples of different heads. They're nearly all blonde, but there's some examples in sort of various shades of brunette, and you also find red heads, but the vast majority are blonde. And even the blonde color changes over time. But this is what I mean. The earlier ones are sort of more of a gray, and by the time you get up here, they're looking quite tanned. Yeah, so you can tell the difference between the earlier and the later ones. Now, as I say, the large lilies were always spray painted or dipped in color, and the early small lilies were also spray painted, but the later ones were made of a shiny pre-colored pink plastic material. So again, they look quite different. The hairstyles are nearly all this sort of blonde with this little sort of curl in the front, but some of them have this upswept hairstyle, though it's felt that that might have been done post-manufacturer by an enthusiastic collector rather than done at the manufacturer itself. So the painting on lilies can vary quite a bit because each painter had their own ideas, and they were encouraged, here we go again, to make each doll unique. So that's a common thing with these 3 dolls, the 3 doll manufacturers, Huret, Munich and Bild Lilli. The painters were encouraged to make each doll unique. The eyebrows, for example, can change both in size and shape. And the eyes are painted this sort of heavy black and white with this heavy liner. The early dolls have red dots. Here, the later ones do not. And also the early ones have eyeshadow, but the later ones do not. The eyeshadow can be blue or gray, green, whatever the painter wanted to do. And the cheeks are nearly always blushed. It can be orange or red, and she's always got this pouty mouth with the cherry red. Some of them have dots in their noses, others not. And one common thing for all of them is they have painted earrings here in this very distinctive sort of flowery style. And the hair, as I say, pulled back into this ponytail with this sort of little bob, this little curl, spit curl, I think it's called. Now, the other thing is this tie, it's normally a sort of black, shiny, plastic, very, very thin piece that's wrapped around the ponytail here and tied. Although I have seen dolls with ties that are different colors to match their clothing. And but the usual one is black. She's also got painted fingernails, which can be red, orange, or light brown, and very, very distinctive that they all have these painted shoes. Vast majority black painted shoes. I have seen rare examples with painted, sort of one-offs, if you like, with painted boots, but this is the key, one of the key things, as well as the painted earrings. It's got the holes in the bottom to put the wire up, and the shoes are painted. Now, all the lilies were sold with these stands and a plastic tube for protection. And the base of the large stand is about 3.5 inches, about 1.5 inches high, and it's got a 3-inch wire coming out of it, which goes into, as I say, this hole in the foot. Now, the clear plastic tube is about 14 inches. It fits very, very tightly on this base. In fact, so tightly, if you try to take it off, it can damage the tube. The plastic lid fits very, very tightly on the top to keep it airtight. So it was a wonderful way of transporting the dolls, kept them very safe. And in fact, some collectors keep them in their tubes. The basis of I talk about marketing, the dolls themselves were not marked, but the bases were marked with these sort of Bild Lilli logos, and each of them had a little Bild Lilli newspaper. They made for the big lilies and the small lilies. And on the top of the tube, you get this 3M mark. And if the doll was made for export, it had different markings. So they were targeting mainly the German market, but they did do some for overseas, and then the labels were changed because for export. Now here's an example of the Lilli stand. This is an original one. The one I showed you previously was a reproduction, because people are making reproduction stands these days. It's not as deep or not as high as the reproduction stand here. The original one is shorter. This is a stand for the small lilies. Very, very different. It's basically a slight dome shape with, and because the doll is so much smaller, a much smaller piece of wire sticking up. And it's actually marked Bild Lilli. Now it's thought that around 30,000 miniature newspapers were made to accompany the small and big and small lilies, with a different edition for the two sizes. And they're filled with Lilli stories, pictures, and of course, cartoons. Now, not every lily was accompanied by a newspaper when sold, and when they were folded and attached to the clothes with a silver pin. I've seen examples of actually where it's original newspaper with the original pin. But as you can imagine, most of them have been, most of the pins have disappeared. Now, accessories. So we've talked about the doll. The accessories, a variety of accessories were available for Lilli, and although some came with the doll, others could be bought separately, and different manufacturers got involved. So they didn't try and sort of make it exclusive to just the manufacturers of the doll. They let other people get involved in the party. This is a Lilli swing for small lilies, and it could be used to display a doll or hang a doll from a mirror in your car, because a lot of men bought the little lilies, a bit like the pilots, and then put them in the car hanging from their mirrors. So it was made by wrapping in the middle of a long white piece of string around a sort of large copper safety pin, and then attached the ends to a wooden stick that Lilli sat on. And then you notice here that this particular Lilli was attached to the swing with her hands with string, so that it didn't come off. This is another example. Germany's always been into manufacture of doll's house rooms and furniture, and this small Lilli, again, ideal size for a doll's house doll. So various room settings and furniture were made for her. This is a sort of summer, sort of lying out in the summer in her bikini with the table and the chaiselongs, or the lounger, I should say, and the umbrella. But also shops and doll rooms were made for her too. This is a Lilli chair. It was inspired by the butterfly chair designed by a gentleman called George Ferrari Hardoy in 1938. The frame is made of enameled steel and the covering is in plastic, and it came with different colors and patterns. And Steiff got involved, because miniature Steiff poodles, they're often displayed with Bild lilies, and they're exactly the right size, and they were made from the 1950s into the 1970s. They came in 3 colors, black, white, and grey. And you see quite commonly when people have photographed their Bild lilies, they're accompanied by a Steiff poodle. They've got these lovely tiny pearl button eyes and nose, and they often come, if you're lucky, with the sort of original label, the tag, the Steiff tag. Now, Lilli memorabilia, lots of people jumped onto the Bild Lilli bandwagon, and the Arca movie company made this movie called Lilli, A Girl of the Big Town, starring Anne Schmierner as Lilli. And not only was there a film, but Michael Jarry composed the Lilli Boogie, which was released as a 45 single by Polydor. The lyrics were written by Bruno Boltz, and the orchestra was conducted by Kurt Indelhagen. And appealing to the initial male audience, a 5-inch plastic car dashboard Bild Lilli was produced. She's got a molded hair, and she's doing a sort of hitchhiking sort of gesture, and painted clothing and face. And she stands, as I say, in this hitchhiking mode. She's attached to this thin metal stick and connects to this suction tube. So if you place her on a dashboard, she sort of jiggles about and she's thumbing a lift as you go. Oh, sorry about that. I touched the wrong button. Next. There was also Lilli jewelry shown here, Lilli perfume, there was Lilli champagne, there was Lilli porcelain figures, there was Lilli wall hangings. The list goes on and on and on. But as I say, this was a whole host of different manufacturers getting involved, jumping on the Lilli bandwagon and creating quite an industry of it. And then there were the clothes. Now, as I say, Lilli originally came with one outfit, but clearly the clothes were a big thing here and the clothes were sold separately. And this was the big thing for Bild Lilli. You could buy one or two Lillis and then you could buy lots and lots of outputs. It was a key part of the doll's overall attraction. Now, as I said, the 3M company was run by Martha Marr, produced the outfits. Martha was actually the mother-in-law of Rolf Hauser, so it was all kept in the family, so to speak, a bit like Huret. Now, although Martha is credited by designing the outfits for Lilli, Buthian, the cartoonist, effectively designed the clothes because she copied the clothes from the comic strip. So he did a comic strip, dressed her in different clothes, she copied the design and then went into production. So the designs were always very up to date and the clothes could be bought separately to build up a trousseau. And to manufacture them, pre-cut fabric pieces were provided to 3M staff working either at the factory or at home. And the key thing to note about Lilli clothing is they have very special, unique fastenings. So you know when you find a Bild Lilli doll, whether it's dressed in Lilli clothing or not, by looking at the fastenings. More of that in a moment, because they had to be done by machine at the factory. So in Germany, they were sold in sort of plain, clear plastic bags that were stamped in red, this, you know, original Dreimen Puppenkleiden for Lilli, so plus the 3M design. So the packaging here clearly said this is a dress for Lilli, and it was made in Germany. Other countries had different packaging labeling, and sometimes very occasionally you get these marked hangers that came with the outfits. Now, booklets were produced listing the latest clothing. So this is a whole list of different outfits with, this is key, the stock number. Do you remember Huret, Munich numbered her dolls? Well, Lilli numbered, the manufacturers numbered the outfits. And this is listed the latest clothing for big and small Lilli with the price. And this was clearly meant for the US market, because here's the prices in US dollars. And this, as you see, Fritz Kohn here, you see export, import, Hamburg. So this was a Hamburg-based company exporting Bild Lilli dolls to the US. And they produced these lovely brochures that you could send overseas and people could order. This was the price list in 1958. And these stock numbers are very, very important because they're used to identify the clothing now. It came with lots of pictures. As you see here, this is the swing that I mentioned earlier. This is outfit number 1113, shorts, pullover and belt. So this was it in German and they had the English translation in there. And also like Munich Art, she used postcards to advertise. So these are little Lillis, small Lillis here, using postcards of various outfits to advertise the doll. So she had that in common with Cowlitz. Now I mentioned these snaps. The top snap on the outside was this sort of dome effect, and it was color coded to match the outfit. So white, yellow, red, you see them in all different colors. And the top snap inside has this PRYM marking on it with sort of different marks. The underside, the undersnap inside had again this particular marking. There's different ones over time, and the undersnap backside again had this PRYM. Partly PRYM is the name of a company that's still going today, and this was their markings. I should have written down what it stood for, but I was asked that question when I did this program before, and they're still going today. Very, very distinctive. And this is what it looks like on the clothing. So here you go, the PRYM, Prym, with these very, very, so look at the fastenings if you're looking at a Bild Lilli doll and the clothing. And this is what the top, so this is a dress that's got some white in it, and they've picked out the white on the dress, and that's the markings. So this is the key to the clothing, because they're not marked otherwise. They don't have a stamp on them or anything. It's the unique fastenings. And the zips that you find in some of the Bild Lilli, they're marked zip. Very helpful. Again, that's a way of identifying whether this is original Bild Lilli clothing. So I'm going to go through the outfits very quickly. Some of these are genuine original Bild Lilli. Some are actually reproduction Bild Lilli. So I'll mention this now, because in 2009, 2010, Julian Kalinowski and Liz Lee partnered up to reproduce Bild Lillis, and they reproduced a limited number of the clothing, amount of the clothing. And so some of these outfits I have bought unknowingly because they're reproduction, and others they're original. But I'm just going to show you, and I look at these and you really are looking at the 1950s fashion. Absolutely up to date, they're fantastic. So, and a mixture of blonde, different colored hairstyles, and you'll also see small and big lilies. So let me just give you a eye candy of Bild Lilli outfits. So sort of a pajama outfit sort of set here, and jacket and shorts. And you'll notice one of the staple things as you go through is black polo neck and black leggings. That was one of the sort of staple outfits of the time. But not full length, sort of short. This is a beautiful off the shoulder dress, absolutely lovely. This is an original one, different colorways, and this is an unusual redhead that you can see here. Beautiful gown with a fur stole that goes round the back. The quality of this clothing is absolutely fantastic. It is like the initial, original, early Barbie clothing. You know, it's couturier of the time, absolutely. This one always reminds me of Star Trek when I look at it, but that's what I mean about the sort of the black leggings and this top. Very, very, and the thin waist, a lot of belts, lots of different colored belts. And this is another sort of lounge suit with the black leggings. Ball gowns, very, very popular outfit in all different sorts of colorways, pink, blues, yellows, whites, etc. Again, off the shoulder, showing the cleavage. Lovely lover summer outfit with skirt, and this again, you know, the V-neck. This one has the fastenings on the front. All the others have the fastenings on the back so far. And this is lovely, lovely. Again, this design of dress was produced in many, many different materials. It was clearly a sort of staple diet for Bild Lillis. These ski outfits, very, very popular. This particular jacket was done in about 6 different colors, and with different sorts of styles of, you know, either 1 row of black or 2 rows of black. These are the ones with the ZIPP on them. But the small Lilli shown here did not have a zip. They just did the jacket. Nighties, these sorts of, you call them baby doll outfits? Was that what you call them? Yes. This is a small Lilli and this is a large Lilli. Again, a good example of where the same outfit was adapted for both sizes and different sorts of materials used. And here you see the small Lilli base versus the large Lilli base. Lots and lots of summer dresses. These are both small Lillis, very simple designs, but very effective. Again, you see these special fasteners on the front here. The fasteners on this one are at the back. And each of those has their own stock number. And there's a book that I'll mention later on that goes through. It's got wonderful, wonderful pictures. It's a library of different Bild Lilli outfits with the stock numbers. The lady who's written it has done a lot of research on this. And for the colder weather, this beautiful, I mean, the lining in this is absolutely stunning. This whole winter outfit with the matching hat, again with the black leggings and the black top. And here's a jacket for the redhead. Oxalot, I think that's called. And this lovely outfit, again, lounger suit with the fur, a lot of fur trims on the Bild Lilli outfits. Again, slightly posher dresses, cocktail dresses. look at the sewing on that with the sort of overskirt. Again, lovely, lovely design. And this is the big Lilli version, and this is a slightly simpler version for the small Lilli. And again, summer dresses for the big Lilies, very, very similar design. Some of them have the sort of trims on them. And towards the end of the Bild Lilli manufacture, they tended to get more regional costumes. I don't know how to pronounce it, Dirndl costumes. It was quite regional with the blouse and skirt rather than the dresses. But these were dresses and that came early on, particularly this one. So why did production suddenly stop? What happened? So, oh, by the way, I should say this Bild Lilli never married. In the cartoons, she never married. But when Julian Kalinowski and Liz Lee were doing the reproduction, they decided to do a wedding dress. So I bought that, and it is actually absolutely stunning. Comes complete with garter and bouquet and pearl seeded headdress, etc. But Bild Lilli never married. In fact, Bothian resigned over that issue, because the Lilli newspaper wanted him to marry Lilli off. And he said, I'm not going to do it because it's not, she would never get married. So they had a parting of the ways because of that. So what happened? Well, the final Lilli cartoon appeared in January 1962. As I say, Bothian quit because the Lilli management wanted him to marry Lilli off. Now, he went on actually to create a Lilli lookalike cartoon, but none were as successful as Lilli. The final Lilli dolls were produced in 1864. Ruth Handler, the co-owner and founder of Mattel, she visited Europe because she was looking for some new inspiration for dolls for Mattel. And she bought some Lillis and brought them back to the States. And she showed them to her development department. They slightly altered the body. They removed the elastic and adapted the big Lilli a bit, and this became the first Barbie, the so-called #1 Barbie. Now in 1964, Mattel bought the worldwide patent for Lilli dolls and stands. So it's a bit similar to the Munich art one, sort of big company versus small company, Mattel versus the little company that was producing Bild Lilli. But at least they paid, they recognized that they were on borderline of copyright, and they bought the worldwide patent for Lilli and the stands, and the production of Lilli ceased. Now, it is estimated that in the 10 years of production, about 130,000 Lilli dolls were made, but a number of them, of course, have gone by the wayside. Compared to the number of Barbies that were made, this is a very limited production. So here's the #1 Barbie compared to Bild Lilli. You can see why Mattel was worried about the patent. Now the fringe has changed, so that's different. The shape of the eyebrows had changed. She had pierced ears, which actually I understand didn't turn out to be such a great idea because her ear went green. Is that correct? So a lot of Barbies have green ears or whatever. So maybe they should have stuck with the painted earrings. But you can see why they were a bit worried about the patent. The painted shoes have gone. The holes in the feet initially remained. So they did away with the painted shoes, but you still, with a #1 Barbie, can see the holes in the feet. But you look at this and you look at that and you go, really? Now, Bild Lilli's legacy, though, was not just Barbie. And in Germany, a number of fashion dolls came onto the market in the 1960s. So in the top left here, you have a doll called Schwabenchen, which was made, it was somebody who was copying the idea of Bild Lilli, a fashion doll, but this one looks, I don't need any copyright issues with this one. The top right is one called Petra. And again, that was one of the Germans. So the German market continued to evolve. Now in the UK, we had Cindy. I don't know whether you've ever heard of Cindy dolls. And of course, since then, there's been all sorts of modern fashion dolls. Bottom left here, we've got Tonner, and of course, we've got Melodum. So for me, when you think about the legacy of Bild Lilli, it's not just Barbie, but it's all sorts of different sorts of fashion dolls. So it's a bit like Huret and a bit like Munich art. They kick-started something completely different. And of course, was it, somebody copying is the greatest form of flattery, reproductions. These two here are Lilli Lalkas, and this was what Julian Kalinowski and Lilli produced in 2009, 2010. So they, for me, are the best reproductions. They're the closest. But there was Lilli copies elsewhere. This is Hong Kong Lilli, which was clearly produced in large numbers at the time. And you can find Hong Kong lilies for sale on eBay and a lot of other places. So, imitation, the greatest form of flattery. Lilli must have been very flattered because, as I say, she was copied a lot of the time. So, what I've tried to do is give you the story of three very different dolls. Each of them had key people involved, Huret, Cowlitz, Bothian, the cartoonist. The motivations for creating the dolls were very different. This was about something completely new in the doll market, but very exclusive. This was something new too, but much more, playability for children. This was to sell newspapers, basically, originally. And, they had different approaches. I say very exclusive, high end, kept it very close to her chest. She wanted control over everything, the clothing. She had contracts with people. Really, Cowlitz was only interested in the artist, and she didn't do clothing, accessories, etc. She did the outfits for the dolls, but she really focused in on the dolls and the dolls' heads in particular. And here, it was a sort of mixed picture. They really did a lot with the clothing, but they let other people, they didn't worry about other people doing the accessories and other things too. So it was a mixed model. Very different successes business-wise, very successful on the Huret side. And as I say, the company went on for 80 years, very limited production on the Munich art side, and she was basically put out of business, and K-Star R took over. Similarly here, limited production only for 10 years, and then Mattel went on with Barbie. So very, very different, but all have their own unique stories. And the one thing they did have in common was they kickstarted a different direction for the doll world, and each of them have had a significant legacy that outlived them. They really broke the mold.
Welcome back. We sure do hope you enjoyed the program. Many thanks to Carol Cameron, who supported us by providing this program for us. We appreciate it. If you haven't already become a member of the United Federation of Doll Clubs, simply click the link at the bottom of the page. It will take you directly to the website where you can find membership and sign up. And when you do, be sure to tell them Karen sent you. We'll see you next time.